Hello and welcome to episode 108 of Tall Guy Talks Travel with Rick Doherty. Of course, I am your host, Rick Doherty. We have a lot of fun planned for today's show. Sarah Says will be here to discuss something related to Universal Orlando Resort for Black History Month. And Marissa from Chicago will be here later for our second round of Fact or Figment. Marissa and I will talk about several strongly held opinions in the Disney community and whether we think these opinions are facts or figments. Before we get started, I have something huge planned for the month of March. Every year, I try to donate basketballs and soccer balls to community organizations that help children. This year, I'm collaborating with other content creators in the Disney community to collect balls for boys and girls clubs in the Orlando area. I'll have more details in next week's episode to tell you how you can donate. My goal is to get so many basketballs and soccer balls that kids are able to take some of them home with them and live a healthy and active lifestyle. I'll also be talking about this all over social media. I'm on Twitter at Rick_ear, on Instagram at RickDohertyTGTT, and on TikTok at Tall Guy Talks Travel. Also, make sure to subscribe to the Tall Guy Talks Travel with Rick Doherty YouTube channel. Now, let's welcome my good friend, Sarah Says. Thanks for being here, Sarah.
Thanks for having me back.
So earlier this month, I was at Universal Studios Florida for the beginning of Mardi Gras 2023, and I posted a bunch of pictures on my personal Facebook page, one of which was me meeting Betty Boop. They had the character sighting of Betty Boop at Universal Studios Florida, and Sarah made a great point in the comments, and I thought we would take some time to talk about it here. So why don't you talk about what you noticed about the meet and greet at Universal?
Yeah. One, I think it's kind of cool you could meet Betty Boop at Universal, but also I was a little confused why Betty Boop was being portrayed by a white woman.
So the first thing we want to say is absolutely no disrespect to the team member who is just doing her job. Like, we don't want to make it seem like we are poo-pooing anybody and their job. Just a very quick side note. But since it is Black History Month, and we just had this little realization on Facebook, Sarah thought it would be really cool to sort of delve into the history of Betty Boop and how it relates to Black History Month.
Yeah, so I thought about too, it was funny when everyone's like, what? What, Betty Boop? What? She's white. And it's funny because there is a cool backstory to Betty Boop that most people don't know. I know it because my grandma was a huge Betty Boop fan. So Betty Boop actually is based off of a woman of color whose name is Esther Jones, or Baby Esther is how a lot of people may know her. She was a 1920s jazz singer who had this super childlike voice, and she was known for her scat singing, where the boop boop a doop came from, like Betty Boop. And Max, I think the artist name is Max Fleischer, is how you say his last name. He based the original Betty Boop off of her. That was in the 1930s. So she initially was animated as a woman of color and appeared first that way in a Popeye the Sailor Man, is that what it's called? But a Popeye cartoon. Through her animation, she's come to be what most people know today. And for me, it was a little confusing because I know the backstory, but now you know the backstory. Sadly, Esther Jones wasn't actually ever compensated for being Betty Boop, but she was a staple of the New York jazz scene, especially in Harlem, and she did unfortunately die pretty young. There's actually, when she died, nobody knew how old she was or anything. It's like date unknown, which is really unfortunate, but she did bring us this really amazing character of Betty Boop.
So I know coming into this conversation, you did a little bit of research, but I was wondering if in that research you figured out, was this an intentional whitewashing of the character, or was it sort of a coincidence because the way that Betty Boop used to be printed in a lot of black and white material, her hair was a lot darker than her skin tone? Did it sort of turn into a thing where people just started assuming, yes, because of their biases? Like, I'm not saying this is a good thing either, But was it just that they started assuming that she was white because of how she showed up with early printing materials?
Yeah, so that's one thing is looking into that, it's very, I don't know if sketchy is the right word, but it's very choppy history of how Betty Boop became white because there was actually a lawsuit that came about in the 30s with the artist and a woman whose last name is Kane. I cannot remember her first name to save my life. But she sued him saying that, oh, he based it off of me and on and on. And he stole this from me. And he actually proved that he didn't. He pulled a recording of Esther Jones and was like, this is who I brought up. And she ended up losing. But then after that is when we stopped seeing Betty Boop as a woman of color. So I haven't actually been able to find any concrete of, oh, we made her white because, but all of a sudden, after the black and white period, she was animated in color as a white woman. So but in black and white, like if you can look it up online and you can actually see how they animated her to make her a woman of color because they darkened to more of a gray than a white. So I'm not 100% sure. One thing that I was very surprised by, I'm not going to name names, but some prominent news sources and historical sources actually never mention, when they talk about the history of Betty Boop, the original Betty Boop. They immediately skip to when she's a colored animation, like color animation thing. And they say, oh, it was based off of a different performer, but they never have mentioned Baby Esther. You have to actually go to some of the smaller like niche historical sites to find it. It's really interesting.
So, Sarah, thanks for coming on just very quickly this week to discuss what I think is a really important piece of theme park history. There's a lot of Betty Boop representation at Universal Orlando Resort, and we get that representation as Betty Boop as a white woman. So, especially in Black History Month, I think it's really important to say some of these things that we consume have their roots in Black culture or in the culture of different people of color. This is a prime example. I didn't even think of it. I was just like, I'm going to get a picture with Betty Boop. And now it turned into what I think is a really educational little segment we had here. So thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm glad I could share some of my knowledge of Betty Boop with you guys.
Follow Sarah Says on Twitter at Sarah Says 84. Let's keep things moving by welcoming Marissa from Chicago. Welcome back, Marissa.
Hello, hello.
We are returning to a very popular game that we played a few weeks ago, and that is Fact or Figment. I am going to state a popularly held opinion in the Disney community, and Marissa and I are going to decide if that opinion is a fact or a figment. I'm going to start with a doozy right here, Marissa.
Oh, boy.
Disney missed a golden opportunity by allowing Harry Potter to go to Universal. Fact or figment?
I'm going to say Figment. I'm going to say that Harry Potter doesn't fit with Disney. I think it fits over in Universal. I think Universal did a fantastic job building out those lands, creating the immersion, all of that. And I don't think that Disney would have done it in the same way. And I think you would have lost some of that charm because they would have felt that some of the magic or castle elements of Harry Potter were a direct competition with their other castle in the parks. So I think that it would look very, very, very different. And honestly, I can't imagine it looking different.
I also believe this is a figment. I think it for a number of reasons. All of the ones that you said make a lot of sense, but there are some logistical issues as well. First of all, the author of the books, whose name I will not mention, wanted very specific guidelines to how she wanted this land to look. One of those was very, very narrow walkways in Diagon Alley. The specs for this land had to be very, very specific, and Disney wanted to widen that area, and she said no. I think that would have been a nightmare in a Disney park. Sometimes it's a nightmare over at Universal, but it would have been heck on earth. All the strollers, all the just people smushed in there if it were in a Disney park. I think the specs alone are why it had to happen at Universal. Universal was like, we'll work with you. We'll make sure this is exactly what you want. But Disney was too far along at that point. The Wizarding World of Harry Potter is what brought Universal back up to Disney's level. So they had a reason to make some accommodations that just wouldn't have worked at Disney. Also, very recently, Disney dealt with all of the drama with Splash Mountain, and dealing with the drama that goes along with that intellectual property right now, Disney wants nothing to do with that. They dodged a huge bullet. Marissa and I have talked before, and we said for some reason Universal's like Teflon. They just do not care. Those types of issues don't affect Universal in the ways that they affect other theme parks, mostly Disney. And it would have been a nightmare. They would not have been able to control all of those things that were being said. Universal handles that stuff a lot better, and I think people don't expect as much out of Universal in some ways. So I think Disney dodged a bullet. This is totally a Figment.
Yeah, Universal seems to handle those things by pretending they're not there, which is an interesting strategy in that it actually works for them. There's a lot more I could say about that, but I won't go on that rant. But I do think Disney definitely dodged a bullet. And I also think that at the time, I don't think Disney was as prepared to invest the money in the land as Universal was, because I think Universal recognized, like you said, this really pulled the parks back up for them. I think they recognized that they needed to really put as much as they possibly could into this. And I could see Disney not doing that because they simply didn't have to.
And one of the coolest things about the Wizarding World of Harry Potter is the Hogwarts Express, which takes you from Diagon Alley to Hogsmeade. And that just wouldn't have been possible at Walt Disney World. If you would have had a train to take you from Magic Kingdom to Hollywood Studios, it would have taken forever. That line would be 3 hours long every single day. Now, staying on the Universal trend, fact or Figment? Epic Universe will turn Universal Orlando Resort into the preeminent theme park destination in the Orlando area. Is that a fact or a Figment?
I think that it's a Figment. I think that Disney's a giant in a way that nothing else can be. But I do think that Epic Universe is going to be a pretty big deal. I think that's going to make a big difference in terms of Universal becoming more than just a long weekend vacation. I think right now it's pretty easy to get the parks done in just 2 or 3 days. Epic Universe is going to change all that. It's going to be a week-long destination.
I think it's a Figment with a caveat again here, and that is that I think the summer of 2025, it's going to be really easy to get Walt Disney World tickets. There are going to be deals all over the place. If you get a 5-day ticket package, that last day is going to be like $5 because they know you're going to go to Disney on an Orlando vacation. I think Disney is still pretty confident and can remain confident even after Epic Universe opens that people will still go to Disney. But maybe it was a 5-day trip with 2 days at Universal before, and now maybe it'll be a 3 at Disney with 4 at Universal, especially the first few years. It's going to give Disney a hit, but I still think that Disney remains the preeminent theme park destination in the Orlando area. I also think a rising tide raises all boats in the theme park community, and Epic Universe bringing their game is going to be the best thing that can happen to Disney fans because they're going to have to counteract that with something.
Yeah, I think it's great. I think for us as fans of both theme parks, it's just extra exciting to see one theme park really go in on this huge, new, exciting land because it does mean that the other park is going to have to do something to try to recapture the attention and, the news. So it's all good for theme park fans.
Fact or Figment? Disney's Hollywood Studios is the best Walt Disney World park for rides.
That is tough.
Just rides.
Ooh, you know, I'm going to say Figment. I'm going to say that even though there are rides at Hollywood Studios that I absolutely love, that park has some of my favorite rides. I think that overall, when people think of Disney rides, the vast majority of them are going to be in Magic Kingdom. There are really iconic rides there that really kind of capture the original aspect of Disney. And I think that there are fewer rides with height limits or height requirements in Magic Kingdom, so more people are able to enjoy all those rides. So I think overall, Magic Kingdom, while it may not have my favorite rides, is still the best park for rides.
I was going to call that a fact, and you just convinced me to change my answer to a Figment. I think that was a very logical response. Magic Kingdom has rides that everybody can ride. When you look at Hollywood Studios and you talk about the big three, Slinky Dog Dash is almost everybody, but some kids can't ride it. Tower of Terror, Rise of the Resistance. Rise of the Resistance, a lot of people can ride it as well, but obviously Tower of Terror, not so much. I didn't think of it that way, and you really brought some. That was a good answer, Marissa. All right. I'm pretty sure I know your answer on this one. Disney's Animal Kingdom is the best Walt Disney World park for theming.
Fact, 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 fact. I'm just going to hit that little button over and over. It is, I would say Magic Kingdom and Animal Kingdom are the two parks that have stuck the most closely to their original theming. And I think that of those two parks, Animal Kingdom has had a stricter theming, whereas Magic Kingdom is just kind of like fantasy, adventure, future, frontier. It has a bunch of lands, and ultimately it's all about magic. But Animal Kingdom really does stick to that preservation, conservation theme. And I really think that when it comes to details, there are so many little tiny conscious design choices throughout all of Animal Kingdom that either enhance the theme or showcase the theme. I mean, for Pete's sake, look at the Tree of Life and all those different animals so masterfully carved into it at all these different angles. I mean, look, I'm obviously super, super, super biased here, but I do think Animal Kingdom is the best themed park.
But you're not biased because you worked on it or anything. You're biased because you love the theming, and that's not really a bias. That's looking at something objectively and deciding which one is your favorite. So I would argue that you're not necessarily biased there. The theming at Animal Kingdom is so on point. I always talk about the bathroom in between Asia and Africa that's themed to the Middle East because the Middle East is in between Africa and Asia. Just those little things that are so quirky. The fact that Harambe, the village in Africa, was supposed to be a village built out of a castle from colonialism that had been destroyed. And they built the wall to the castle and then broke it down so that you can see the rock work on the ground. And those little things that a lot of people will not notice. I tried to throw in an easy one here because Disney's Animal Kingdom is definitely the best themed Walt Disney World park.
I will say that I also do have some outside confirmation for that, in terms of one of my friends who I went to the parks with, who originally was not excited to go to Animal Kingdom at all. And after we walked through the park and I talked about these details and we looked at like all the theming, now it's one of her favorite parks and she keeps asking me when we're going back to Animal Kingdom. So everyone can appreciate how much care went into building that park.
Is that even a question you have to ask Marissa? Like, she's like, when can you go next? Like,
I know. I'm like, well, when do you want to go?
I think I know the answer to this one. I think we're going to agree on this one, and I'm surprised with my answer. The Star Wars Galactic Star Cruiser has been a huge mistake. This is the Star Wars hotel that had been teased for years and years and years, and you might not even know as a casual guest that this thing is open at all.
Yeah, this is a weird one. Um, I'm gonna have to talk through my thoughts a little on this one because I think there's definitely a niche of people who love this experience and are so excited by it and will spend the money to do it. For me, that's not something that I personally am willing to do, but I don't know if that overall makes it a mistake, you know?
I feel like the people who wanted to do it have done it already. They're already at the point where they are canceling reservations for the Galactic Star Cruiser in the summer because those missions or cruises or whatever they call them aren't filling up to the level that will make it economically viable for Disney to continue to do this. I think this was a great idea that did not get executed properly because, like I even indicated, you don't even notice it. You don't even think about it. This should be the type of experience that when you're in Hollywood studios, you're thinking, man, I wish I could do that. I wish I could experience this Galactic Star Cruiser because that's the only way you're going to get people to want to do this. And I know for a fact at the beginning, they comped a lot of people to talk about this experience. And I'm not too proud. I'll sell my soul. Disney, you want to put me up? I'll say completely nice things about it. But that's not true. I'm making a joke, everyone. I would not do that. But I think it got a lot of positive reviews at the beginning because so many people weren't paying for it. And the people who were paying for it were those super mega fans who were going to love it no matter what. I really think this isn't going to be around for a long time, or it's not going to be around in the way it exists right now.
Yeah, yeah, those are all fantastic points. And I do think you're right. I think it's going to have to change or adapt or offer something because you're right. I don't think it is viable long term running the way that it currently is. I It does make me wonder, really thinking about it like that. It does make me wonder almost what did Disney expect from this? The way it's priced, you could take a real cruise for that money and actually go somewhere, as opposed to being in like a windowless LARP room for 48 hours. Which, like, hey, if that's your thing, that is fabulous. I am not out here to, bag on what anyone likes. That's not what I'm here for. It's not what I personally would choose to spend my money on. And yeah, it does seem like there's a lot of other people in that same boat. So, what were they expecting?
I think they overestimated the disposable income of the hardcore Star Wars fan. The casual Star Wars fan has a lot of money to spend at Galaxy's Edge, and they will spend that money in the shops in the marketplace, in Doc Ondar's Den of Antiquity. They'll spend it at Oga's Cantina. But the hardcore Star Wars fan, I don't think has the disposable income that they think. It wasn't going to draw a lot of families. It wasn't going to be a place where you're going to take your kids because it was an experience that might be weird for them. whereas childless millennials don't have a ton of disposable income. So it feels like you built something for a particular category of people that might not all have the money to do it. And the ones who did have done it already.
That's true. And I think a lot of people, I think there are a lot of people with kids who think it would be right up their kids' alley and something they would enjoy. But at that price, they can't justify it.
This one's a little pet issue of mine that I've started to notice in my journeys, but I haven't heard many people talking about it, so maybe it's not a big deal. E-cigarettes are becoming a problem in the parks.
Yeah, that's a fact. That's something that I think Disney had the best intentions, and I think from my perspective, it was the right move to remove the smoking stations in the park because of where some of them were located. They weren't necessarily all out of the way. But I think in doing so, they've motivated people to get sneaky. I have noticed since that change, a lot more people with e-cigarettes in the parks. Just kind of, some of them aren't even hiding it anymore. Last time I was in Epcot, there were people just walking around, not a care in the world, and it's a shame.
So this is coming from somebody who used to be a smoker. And I used to smoke. I was good at it. And I know when I was in my 20s and over spring break, we went down to the parks. My goal was to smoke every smoking section in Magic Kingdom. Like, I was a person who loved it. It was part of my personality. Now, I haven't done it in a long time now, but I feel sort of like what you were saying, that when they removed the smoking sections from inside the parks, and a lot of them were in dumb locations, you are 100% correct about that. But when they removed the ability for people to have a place to go in the parks where they could smoke, and then these e-cigarettes became more and more accessible and cheaper, and everybody had them. And all of a sudden, somebody can just take one quick puff and put it right back into their pocket. They don't have to figure out what to do with the cigarette butt or anything like that. And it has just made it worse than if you found good smoking locations that are backing out of the way.
Yep, I really do think the move would have been to relocate some of the locations to somewhere a little more off the path. Maybe, build out a little space or re-landscape an area if you have to, because removing them all is just unrealistic for a lot of people. And I mean, I don't smoke, but obviously, there are a lot of smokers in the world, and a lot of them want to vacation in Disney World with their family. And it is unrealistic to expect them, if they're in the back of the park, to go all the way to the front of the park, leave the park, and then come back in. That's a process. And in a vacation as hectic and as packed with activities as Disney usually is, they're not going to do it. They're just going to sneak an e-cigarette in and use that.
And I will say, as somebody who did used to be a smoker, this is on the smokers as much as it's on Disney, because if you are respectful of the people around you and aware of the people around you, you can enjoy a cigarette and not bother other people. But what ended up happening is people continue to take advantage. They move a little further out of the smoking area. They don't pay attention to what's going on around them. And then they get rid of smoking entirely. And then this problem comes in, and now there's no smoking section for somebody, and they'll just puff up in line for Peter Pan's flight.
That's really funny because I was going to say this was specifically an issue in line for Seven Dwarfs, which was absurd because it was indoors. It was inside at that time. And I was like, man, you couldn't even do this before you walked in the doors? You had to wait? But that's just what's been happening.
Hey, listen, you're from Chicago. You know, sometimes prohibition leads to a lawless society. And it happened where you live, and it is sort of happening a little bit in Walt Disney World. Listen, I don't care if you smoke, and I'm not 100% saying this is your fault because I think something needs to be done about it. I think that nobody's talking about it, therefore nothing's going to be done about it. So I hope that we can find a way that that little walkway beside the American Adventure in Epcot, let people use their e-cigarettes there, or let them use them in that back section of Tomorrowland where there's just nothing but a couple benches.
Definitely. And I do want to say it's not on the cast members either. I think it is unfair to expect cast members to approach these people and reprimand or try to stop them, especially when sometimes, especially now, you do not know how a person will react to a confrontation like that. And I think it is unfair to put it on, an 18-year-old kid on a college program to go up to someone, twice their age and say, hey, you're not allowed to do that here, knowing that that person could get angry at them.
Marissa and I will be running the 10K this Saturday as part of the Princess Half Marathon weekend with Run Disney. I'm woefully ill prepared, but I'm also an official Boston Marathon finisher, so don't you dare judge me. If you see me on Saturday, make sure to say hi. I'd really appreciate it. I also want to mention that Walt Disney World cast members are currently negotiating for a very reasonable starting pay increase. These cast members are so deserving, and they truly are the ones who bring the magic. In recent months, I've actually had to put together care packages of food for CM friends who were struggling to eat. It's important to me, as somebody who gets so much joy out of the Walt Disney World theme parks, to state that I support the cast members 100%. Housing prices are skyrocketing in the Orlando area, and these CMs deserve a living wage as the people who literally make Orlando more than just a small stop between Daytona and Tampa. Last week, I brought you the news that Universal Orlando Resort has agreed to raise their starting pay $2 an hour to $17 an hour. Come on, Disney, step up and do the right thing. Not only is it going to be good for business because you're going to get to keep these wonderful cast members from moving down I-4 and going to Universal to take advantage of that raise, but it's going to be great PR. This is a must-do for Disney. Please lock up these cast members under a good contract. This has been episode 108 of Tall Guy Talks Travel with Rick Doherty. We will return next week with Sarah Says and I covering what is wrong with Tomorrowland in both Magic Kingdom and Disneyland. Both versions desperately need updating. That is next Thursday. Until then, have a great week.